So I stayed and taught. My sister was teaching this Lone Redwood school, which was a one-room school, just like the schools we'd gone to. 8 grades, 40 pupils. And they were a rough bunch of youngsters. They had really been roughnecks, not like they are today, but they had teachers who had no discipline. And the last teacher before my sister, they had driven out of the school with a inner tube and were whipping her down the railroad track, which went past the school. And that teacher quit, and my sister was the next teacher. So they started in on Frances. And she was never a very good disciplinarian. She was sweet and good and not a very good disciplinarian. So she was about to have a nervous breakdown. And I was home doing nothing, taking care of my little brothers and sisters and helping my mother. And I decided I'd like to teach. And she was offered a very good position in a music store here, or in a store here in town that had a fine music department. Sold pianos and phonographs and records and that sort of thing. And at much more money than the $75 a month she was getting teaching. She hated teaching, and the kids had her really buffaloed. She couldn't discipline them at all. They wouldn't do anything, she said. And she'd been at this for about 6 weeks, and she would roll and toss in the night and cry out. We had a room together. And I said, Frances, I'll take your school if the trustees will let us. I'll see what I can do. So the trustees were all friends of my father, of course, in the neighborhood, and they said, yes, they'd be glad to try Helen. Frances wasn't working out so well. So Helen took over the school. And they were all the way from little first graders, bare feet and runny noses, and some poverty-stricken, some pretty well-to-do people. But 40 children, 8 grades, 1 room. Same sort of thing I'd gone to. And I had to drive about 3 miles to the school. And the 3rd day of school, things were going just fine. I thought I was sitting on top of the world. Things were about the 3rd day of school. I had a little first grader up trying to teach him to read. And I heard a pencil drop. And I got a cold chill at my spine. Then another pencil dropped. Pretty soon a book dropped. You know, in the schoolroom it's quiet. Pretty soon this tramping with their feet. And my face was getting redder and redder, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So finally I said, Setimo, take your book and go to your seat. And I stood up. And I stood there. And I stood there. And I stood there, looking at them. And finally the noise stopped. My children laugh when I tell them this. They say, Mother, if that happened today, they'd have laughed you out of the schoolroom. She said, you were lucky it was in that day. I said, I'm going to tell you a story. And there was dead quiet. So I told them a fancy tale about my husband, how he was over there overseas fighting for their liberty, for his liberty, for our liberty. He was a major in the army. He had all these men. And if he gave a command, they had to obey instantly. If they didn't, they might be killed. The whole battalion would be wiped out. And he was doing that for me and for my family and for their families. And, you know, the whole sentimental bit. Those children looked at me. From then on, I was a queen. They fought over who was going to hitch my horse up at night. They did, behind my back, call me Mrs. Cornstalk. But, oh, they were just priceless. They were so good. And then I found out why those boys were bad. They weren't really bad. This huge acre field, in it there was nothing for them to do. They could play, what was that, where you drew a line and ran around somebody, surrounded somebody, and then they were caught, or you could play hide and go seek. So I came into town. By that time, my sister had, she was going with this Anders Nielsen, who owned the furniture store where she was working. And he was an awfully nice person, and he and I were good friends. And I said, Anders, those children don't have a thing to play with. He was a Danish man, much older than my sister. And I said, he was very athletic, as most Danes are. And I said, if we just had some baseball equipment, I could teach him to play baseball, because I played baseball with my brothers and at the school I went to. So Anders went out and bought 2 bats and a ball and some gloves, and we organized a baseball team. Well, that was just wonderful for those boys. Then we began to buy other things for the smaller children to play with, games and things, and we didn't buy too much. I think I spent my first $75, first month's salary, buying things for them. And then Christmas came, and there was one family by the name of Cook. Well, I guess if I were in Appalachia, I'd see the same kind of poverty, but they were poor. There were 2 girls and a little boy, and they were always runny-nosed and had colds and awful clothes. So one day, after the children were all very anxious to have a Christmas tree and have Christmas, give each other presents. So one day after the Cooks went home, because they were all younger, I had the children stay, and I said, let's have Christmas for the Cook children. Let's not have Christmas for us, because we'll all have Christmas at home. This was the only really poverty-stricken family in the district. They were all farmers with not much, but not poverty. So we decided everybody would buy a little inexpensive present for the Cook children. And Anders went and bought yards and yards of material. The mother did sew. And he bought material for the little girls to have dresses made, and he bought overalls and shirts for the little boy. They didn't wear T-shirts in those days. They wore little shirts. And we all bought presents and candy. I bought candy for all of them. And Christmas came, and we had the tree, and everything on it was for the Cooks. Those little things went running home with their arms full of stuff. It was the only Christmas they'd ever had. Well, of course, those youngsters of mine just thought they were God, because they'd provided such a beautiful Christmas, and from then on they had always teased and made fun of these children and chased them home and been real bad to them. From then on, they were nice to those children. And we really had a marvelous 9 months there. I loved that school.